The fluorescent lights hummed the same low note they always did. When Coop started his night shift at the Circle K on Fremont Avenue, he liked the quiet. Most of the neighborhood slept, and the only sounds came from the soda cooler-esque compressor and the occasional buzz of a moth against the window. He straightened a crooked poster near the counter, tapped the register to wake it up, and checked the till. The printer gave a soft, mechanical sigh as he counted bills. Jazz Morales leaned over the counter, her phone glowing against her face. "You ever notice how creepy this place gets after midnight?" she asked, snapping a quick photo for her feed. "It's a gas station," Coop said, sliding the cash drawer shut. "Supposed to be boring." Rosa Nguyen came in with a plastic container of pie, as she did most nights after her own shift at the diner. "You two need some sugar to stay awake," she said, setting the pie down. She pointed to the bulletin board near the entrance, where a fresh missing person flyer fluttered under the air conditioner's draft. "Another girl's gone. Lena Park. Been missing since April." "Poor family." Jazz lowered her phone. "That's the third this month." They talked quietly about how people could just disappear. Coop poured himself burnt coffee and tried not to think about it. Around 1 a.m., a young man bought a bottle of water. Coop rang it up, slid the bottle across, and the printer coughed out a receipt. He tore it free, ready to hand it over, then stopped. Printed beneath the total was a single line: "Lena Park, last seen for 12ths, Pier 3. The customer glanced at it and left without a word. Jazz leaned closer. "That's not funny, Coop." "It's not me," he said, checking the screen. "Nothing unusual, just the price and time. Must be a glitch." He tossed the slip into the trash. 10 minutes later, Jazz went to restock the candy aisle. Coop," she called. When he joined her, she held up a cheap plastic bracelet with Alina stamped on a faded tag. This was on the floor, still warm like someone just dropped it. They searched the security feed. Nothing, just static during the time between the water sale and when Jazz found the bracelet. The next night, it happened again. This time the receipt read, "Jason L. I. Bridge, exit 52314. As Coop stared at the words, a clatter came from aisle 3. A folded photograph of a teenage boy lay among the chips. Jazz's eyes were wide. "That's a missing kid from last year. I saw his poster at the bus stop." Rosa came in at the end of her diner shift and listened to the story. "This isn't a prank," she whispered. "Those details aren't public." Coop called the non-emergency police line. Detective Marcus Lyle arrived an hour later, tall and tired-eyed. He listened while Coop and Jazz showed him the receipts and the objects. "Could be someone sneaking in, planting these," Lyle said, though his voice lacked conviction. He examined the printer. "Still, these names match unsolved cases. Keep any new receipts and call me right away." The nights that followed grew stranger. Each receipt printed a name, a date, a location. Each time, a personal item appeared: a shoelace, a bus token, a crumpled postcard, each linked to someone missing. Cameras caught nothing but the occasional flicker of static. While closing one evening, Coop found an old staff log tucked behind the safe. The handwriting belonged to Eddie, the clerk who had died in the store 2 years earlier, supposedly after slipping in the stockroom. Margin notes lined the pages. Numbers, delivery schedules, and a half-finished sentence: "They think no one will notice, but I will make it right." Jazz stared at the scrawl. "You think Eddie's doing this?" Before Coop could answer, the printer shrieked and spat out a long receipt. It read, "Dominic Ruiz Bay Storage, 17 to 1140. A heavy thump echoed from the hardware aisle. They found an expensive power tool sitting neatly on the shelf, though they hadn't stocked that model in months. Coop's phone buzzed. Detective Lyle's voice came sharp through the speaker. "Lock the doors. Don't let anyone in or out. We're on the way." Outside, headlights swept across the windows. A white contractor's van pulled up. Dominic Ruiz, a regular supplier, stepped out with an easy smile and walked toward the door. He raised a hand to knock.
"Oh."
The lights inside flickered, and the register screen glowed a dull green. Coop felt the hair on his arms rise as Dominic's shadow stretched across the floor, reaching for the handle. Coop froze, one hand hovering near the lock. Dominic's knuckles rapped lightly on the glass, the sound sharp against the hum of the fluorescent lights. Jazz stood a few feet behind him, clutching her phone like a weapon. "Don't open it," she whispered. Coop nodded and tried to keep his voice steady. We're closed for inventory. Dominic leaned closer, his breath fogging the glass. It's late for inventory, isn't it? His grin didn't reach his eyes. Before Coop could answer, red and blue lights splashed across the parking lot. Detective Lyle's cruiser skidded to a stop, followed by another patrol car. Officers stepped out, hands near their holsters. Dominic straightened, raising his palms. Evening, officers, he said with a casual smile that didn't hide his surprise. Lyle approached, keeping a careful distance. Dominic Ruiz. That's me. What's going on? We've had reports of suspicious activity, Lyle replied. Mind stepping back from the door? Dominic shrugged and moved toward his van. Officers followed, asking him questions. Coop finally exhaled. Inside, the register beeped once, then twice, and a new receipt slid out on its own. Lyle noticed and asked Coop to hand it over. The slip read, Storage Bay 17, Unit 42 to 15. Lyle's eyes narrowed. That's the second time Bay 17 has come up tonight. Keep this safe. He turned to the officers outside. Hold him for questioning. Hours later, after Dominic was escorted away, the store was quiet again. Jazz locked the doors while Coop brewed fresh coffee for Lyle, who sat at the counter studying the stack of strange receipts. These are addresses, Lyle said finally. Dates, times, locations where missing persons were last seen. And every object you found, bracelets, photos lines up with evidence we never released. He tapped the slip marked with Storage Bay 17. I'm getting a warrant for that unit. Coop hesitated. Detective, we think. Maybe Eddie's trying to tell us something, Eddie? The clerk who died here 2 years ago, Jazz explained. We found his old logbook. He was worried about someone stealing shipments. Lyle raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. If someone murdered him, to keep him quiet, we'll find out. The next evening. Coop arrived early to help Lyle and to forensic techs review the security footage again. As they watched, the cameras glitched at the exact moments the receipts printed, the picture washing out in static. On one frozen frame, a faint silhouette hovered behind the counter shoulders, hunched like someone leaning over the register. Could be interference, one technician muttered. Or it could be Eddie, Jazz said softly. Lyle didn't comment. He only asked them to keep the store sealed until he returned from the storage facility. At midnight, with the detective gone, the PA's machine began to whir. The printer spat out another slip, cooler door check shelf. Jazz and Coop exchanged a look and walked to the beverage cooler. Inside, on the top shelf, sat a small envelope stained with oil. Coop opened it carefully. Inside was a letter written in the same slanted handwriting from Eddie's logbook. If you find this, I couldn't finish what I started. They used the store to hide their trades. Dominic is part of it. Check Bay 17. Please tell the truth for me. Jazz shivered. He knew. Before dawn, Lyle returned, face grim. We found stolen goods and personal effects from multiple missing persons in that storage unit, he said. Dominic and 2 others from the supply chain are in custody. This is bigger than we thought. He set Eddie's envelope on the counter, reading it silently. Looks like your friend Eddie kept records the old-fashioned way and a strange way. Over the next week, arrests multiplied. The town buzzed with the story of a Circle K register that revealed a smuggling ring and tied together a string of disappearances. Coop gave his statement and watched officers haul away boxes of stolen merchandise and evidence that finally closed cold cases. By the following Friday, life began to return to normal. The night shift felt quieter than ever. Jazz scrolled through headlines while Coop restocked shelves. No strange receipts had printed for 2 days. Then, near 3 a.m., the printer clicked. Coop turned, heart lurching. A single, narrow slip emerged. It read, Cooper Hayes. Watch minus 1,979. Coop's breath caught. The year was the one etched on the back of his late father's pocket watch, a family heirloom stolen when he was a kid and never recovered. Jazz peered over his shoulder. What does it mean? Before he could answer, a soft clink sounded behind the counter. Coop looked down. Resting beside the register was a tarnished silver watch, its face cracked but unmistakable. He picked it up, the metal cold against his palm. The printer fell silent. The store lights flickered once, then steadied. Jazz whispered, I guess Eddie isn't finished. Coop stared at the watch, a chill crawling up his spine. Maybe Eddie had one last story to tell, or maybe the machine had learned to remember more than anyone alive ever could. Maya Santos knew every hum and flicker of the Circle K's late-night routine. By 2 in the morning, the store settled into a steady rhythm. The cooler's compressor droned like a tired horn. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, and the lone TV mounted in the corner cycled through late-night infomercials. She liked the quiet. Finishing her community college coursework during the slow hours helped pay for tuition, and the night shift offered a strange kind of peace. She balanced a crate of bottled water on her hip, nudged the stockroom door open with her elbow, and stacked the bottles neatly. Robbie Hayes, the assistant manager, leaned over the counter, tapping numbers into the inventory tablet. "You should get hazard pay for organizing like that," he said with a grin. "Only if the hazard is boredom," Maya replied, brushing dust off her hands. They traded easy jokes until the bell over the front door jingled and an elderly regular shuffled in. Mrs. Lillian. Price bought the same tea every night, always leaving a few coins on the counter as a tip. Maya brewed the tea, while Lillian told a quick story about a stray cat prowling the alley. After she left, the shop returned to silence. At 3 o'clock, Maya tied off the trash bags and hauled them toward the back alley. The early spring air smelled of damp asphalt and fryer oil from the diner across the street. She heaved the bags into the dumpster and was about to head back inside when a sound stopped her. It was not wind, nor the rustle of a raccoon. A low, layered whisper drifted from the shadows behind the dumpster. Multiple voices, faint but unmistakable, spoke in overlapping fragments. Under the pallet. Red ribbon, not the pier. Maya froze, her heart pounding so hard it made her fingertips tingle. She scanned the alley. Nothing moved except a flickering security light. She forced a shaky laugh. Maybe a late-night prank. Maybe the diner's exhaust fan echoing strangely. Back inside, the air felt suddenly too bright. She locked the door and checked the monitors. The alley camera showed only still darkness, but as she rounded the counter, something crimson caught her Aja child's red ribbon draped across the lower snack shelf. She was sure it hadn't been there a moment ago. Maya picked it up. The fabric was cold and damp, smelling faintly of soil. Her pulse quickened. She slipped the ribbon into her apron pocket, just as Robbie emerged from the back. "You look like you saw a ghost," he said. "Probably just tired," she muttered, but her voice trembled. The next night, the whisper came again. This time it said a name. Tom Alvarez, and something that sounded like Baxter Lott. Maya yanked out her phone and hit the voice memo app, holding it toward the dumpster.
Only.
The faint chorus, breathy and broken, filled the speaker. When she stepped back inside, a small brass button rested near the register, dull with grime. She had wiped that counter only minutes earlier. She began logging everything: time, words, any object that appeared afterward. Each incident followed the same pattern. A whispered clue outside, a strange item inside. She filled pages in a spiral notebook, matching details with local news on her breaks. Several names belonged to people listed as missing in the area. Robbie listened to her recordings but shook his head. Could be a weird radio signal. Or someone messing with you. Then who's leaving these? She placed the ribbon, the button, and a torn scrap of flannel on the counter. He picked them up reluctantly, studying the damp edges. "Security footage shows nothing," she added. "No one coming in." Robbie's skepticism faltered. "Okay," he said finally. "But don't go back there alone again." 2 nights later, the voices offered the clearest message yet. Parking Baxter Lot. West Corner. The words rattled her bones. Robbie insisted on accompanying her. They walked to the nearly empty lot behind a shuttered warehouse. Under a broken street lamp, a faint metallic glint caught Maya's eye. Buried in gravel lay a cracked phone, its screen dark but intact. The background image was a smiling young man, one of the missing persons she'd read about. They brought the phone to Officer Dana Collins at the nearby precinct. Collins listened carefully, brows knitting, when she saw the case file match the name on Maya's recording. "We'll send this to forensics," the officer said, skeptical but intrigued. "How did you know to look there?" Maya hesitated. "I just heard something." Back at the store, she felt both vindicated and uneasy. The whispers weren't random. They were leading her somewhere. At night near closing, the air in the alley turned icy. A dozen voices merged into one urgent plea, so close, she felt the vibration against her ear. He hides the ledger. Behind the blue pallet. Listen. Then a single name alive, not dead rung clear, someone she recognized from the delivery schedule. Her stomach dropped. She recorded every second, heart hammering, and texted the audio to Officer Collins. Inside, she approached the back storage area, the blue pallet looming in the dim light. A faint creak echoed from the shadows. Someone else was there. As she reached for the pallet, a hand brushed hers, warm, real, and very much alive. Maya jerked back with a sharp gasp, her phone tumbling to the concrete. The hand that touched hers wasn't ghostly. Robbie stood in the dim light of the storage room, eyes wide and face pale. "Sorry," he said quickly, raising both palms. "You nearly gave me a heart attack." "You were supposed to be at the front counter," she whispered, still catching her breath. "I heard noises back here. Thought maybe a raccoon got in." He glanced at the blue pallet. "What are you doing?" She steadied herself and lowered her voice. "The whispers told me to look behind this." Robbie frowned. "Maya, you can't keep just help me move it," she interrupted. Something in her tone must have convinced him because he grabbed the opposite side. Together they shifted the heavy pallet aside, revealing a narrow cavity between the stack of soda crates and the wall. A black binder sat inside, edges worn and sticky with grime. Maya pulled it out carefully. The plastic cover cracked under her grip. She opened it to find pages of handwritten notes, dates, and dollar amounts. Names leaped from the pages, some of them matching the missing person reports she had studied. Robbie exhaled sharply. "What the hell is this?" "It's a ledger," she said. "This is proof." Before they could process the find, the store's front doorbell chimed. They exchanged uneasy glances. No one should be coming in at this hour. Robbie slipped out to check. Moments later, a sharp clatter echoed from the sales floor, followed by a low voice. Maya clutched the binder and followed cautiously. She found a man standing near the counter, tall and broad-shouldered. His Circle K delivery jacket zipped to the collar. It was Brent, the overnight delivery driver scheduled to arrive later that morning. "Evening," he said casually, though his eyes were fixed on the binder in her arms. "I think that belongs to me." Her grip tightened. "Why would a delivery driver have this?" He smiled thinly. "Because I keep track of what's moved through this store. Things you wouldn't understand." Robbie stepped between them. "Brent, what's going on?" Brent's gaze hardened. "Put the binder down. Maybe we all walk away." Maya's phone buzzed in her pocket. Text from Officer Collins. "On my way. Stay safe." The whispers began again, faint but insistent, curling around Maya's ears like a cold breeze. "Don't trust him. Hold it, hold it." She raised her chin. "The police already know." She lied, her voice trembling, but steady enough. "They're coming right now." Brent's jaw tightened. "Then I guess I can't wait." He reached for the binder, but Robbie shoved a display rack into his path. Chips and candy bars scattered across the floor as Brent stumbled back, cursing. Maya dashed behind the counter, pressing the emergency alarm beneath the register. A shrill beep filled the store. Brent lunged forward, but a sudden crash from the back room made him freeze. The whispers swelled into a chorus, no longer faint but deafening, echoing from every aisle. Dozens of names poured through the air like a spectral chant. The lights flickered wildly, casting frantic shadows across the walls. Brent clapped his hands over his ears, eyes wide with panic. "Stop it," he shouted, staggering toward the exit. The automatic doors hissed open, and he bolted into the night. Within minutes, flashing blue lights bathed the storefront. Officer Collins and 2 other officers rushed inside. After a frantic explanation, Maya handed over the binder. Robbie replayed her recordings of the whispers, each name chillingly clear. Collins flipped through the ledger, her expression darkening with every page. "These are detailed transactions dates, amounts, initials. This is big. You two may have just cracked a trafficking ring." They secured the store and followed the officers outside. The alley felt different, now still cold, but lighter somehow, as if a weight had lifted. For the first time in weeks, Maya heard only the normal hum of the city night. The next day, Detectives confirmed Brent's involvement in a regional smuggling operation. Several missing person cases were reopened based on the names in the binder. News crews swarmed the parking lot, but Maya declined every interview. She worked her next shift with a quiet sense of relief. Yet as she restocked the cooler that evening, a faint breath brushed her ear. "Thank you." Maya paused, heart thudding. She looked around the empty aisle, then whispered back, "You're welcome." The store lights flickered once, gently like a final nod, and then the Circle K settled into its usual late-night rhythm only. This time the silence felt like peace, not fear. Todd Garza liked the way the pumps clicked awake at night, the soft metallic cough. The hiss of diesel settling into hoses. Station had a rhythm. Trucks at midnight, the diner regulars at 2, the occasional drunk at 3. He'd run the place for 10 years and knew every dent on the awning and every faded oil stain on the concrete. When Mia Alvarez started the graveyard shift, he liked that she kept things sharp, cash drawer balanced, receipts filed. The little loneliness of the night made practical. Mia liked the quiet for a different reason. It let her think. She'd learned to code in online tutorials and had a habit of looking for patterns in everything. Delivery manifests. Pump telemetry, the way receipts printed. On a Tuesday in late April, she watched the pump spool and the printer cough under the register, spitting its thermal strip with the same jagged edge it always did. A driver prepaid at pump 4 and toddled away, and Mia bagged his coffee and handed him the receipt. She glanced down at the tiny strip for dollars and some change, then did a double take. Under the total, in the machine's regular font, someone had added a strange line. RTE 17. BAY 0407X9. Todd leaned over. "Printer glitch?" he asked, but there was no shred of humor in the question. The morning papers were full of scams and hacks. Thermal printers weren't immune. Mia folded the slip and kept it in her pocket. The next night, another pump, another odd tale. RTE03BAY11X2. She started keeping them in a shoebox behind the counter. By the end of the week, she had 6 slips with repeating fragments or TE-BAY, a 2-digit number that looked like a date, and a trailing tag that changed between X's and numbers. She pulled the station manifests up on her tablet and began mapping. RTE matched route numbers on the invoices. Bay lined up with storage bays at the city's distribution yard 3 miles downriver. The final tag X9, X2 didn't make sense until she cross-referenced crate codes in the supplier's paperwork. Then it did. Crate IDs. Someone was printing a schedule. "It's like a delivery list," Mia said one slow morning, as dawn creased the station's horizon. Todd rubbed the sleep from his eyes. "So you thinking we're a halfway point for smugglers?" "I'm thinking someone's using our pumps to print an itinerary," she replied. "Someone's routing goods through the bays and using our station as a waypoint." Todd had never been the heroic type. He'd been suspicious of cheaper suppliers and never liked Hector Salastu smooth. Too eager to keep things off the books, but this was the sort of accusation that could ruin a man. "Bring it to the cops," he suggested, offhanded and hopeful. Mia didn't move fast on hope. She kept collecting receipts. One night, after she'd rebooted the pump network because the touchscreen froze, the printer spat something longer. The sheet hung curly in the tray like a ribbon. As she picked it up, a small folded item fell from beneath the stack. A locket dull with dirt clinked against the counter. Todd's hand hovered over it. He recognized the engraving on the back initials he'd seen on a missing person S-flyer stapled to the community board. "Kev's locket," he said, and his voice went thin. Kev Morales had worked nights for them until 2 months ago. He'd been short on cash and quieter than usual. Then he'd stopped showing up. They'd thought he'd found a day job. The locket made that thought feel foolish. Mia ran the locket under a lamp. Inside was a tiny photograph, face so small it needed a magnifier. She slipped it into a plastic evidence bag the way she'd seen CSI do on TV. Todd called the non-emergency line, and after a rinse of procedural skepticism, a real detective arrived. Rosa Ramirez, tired eyes, efficient without flourish. She lifted the locket like a thing that had weight beyond its size. "You sure no one's been in here?" Ramirez asked. "Cameras showed nothing during the printing," Mia said. "I rebooted the pump system a few nights ago." The receipts started right after that. She said it like a confession. Todd felt the room tilt. Ramirez squinted at the crinkled receipts. "You've got a pattern," she said. She wrote RTE 17 and BAYO 407 in her notebook, then asked about suppliers. Todd mentioned Hector Salas without enthusiasm. Ramirez didn't flinch. "Keep everything secure," she said. "Do not let anyone remove items from the store. If these codes match distribution logs, this is a lead." Mia's thumb hovered over a phone screen. She opened the pump logs and watched the timestamps. The prints came at system boot-like. Someone had set a macro to print hidden fields when the network initialized. A rough idea settled in her chest. The receipts weren't accidental. They were meant to be found. At 10:22 p.m. the next night, Mia's screen pinged. "Lock the doors. Don't let anyone leave." Lights hummed a little louder, like a warning. The station's front door stood glass and vulnerable to the street beyond where headlights rolled. Behind the pump canopy, a van eased into the lot, white and ordinary save for the faint logo on the side. Hector Logistics. A man stepped down. Ordinary, too. Moving with the practiced ease of someone who'd been in and out of places like this for years. Todd's fingers closed around the emergency bell beneath the counter. Mia's lungs grabbed at cold air. The pump printer sat idle, its paper tray empty and innocent. Outside, the man raised his hand to knock. The moment stretched like a film frame, and for the first time in years, Todd felt the small business he kept precarious in a way it had never been caught between a string of printed codes and whatever it was they were meant to expose. Ramirez's voice over the radio was clipped and efficient. "Lockdown now," she said. "Backup's 5 minutes out. Won't let anyone leave." Todd thumbed the alarm under the counter and felt the muscle in his jaw go tight. Outside, the man from Hector Logistics, Hector's foreman, Ramirez called him later, stared through the glass, brows knitting in annoyance. He might have been a routine supplier if not for the receipts. 2 squad cars arrived and officers fanned out, lights painting the pumps red and blue. Ramirez moved like someone who had learned to count seconds. She asked a series of direct questions, then told the foreman to wait by his van until they could sort warrants and identification. He cooperated with a face like someone who thought he could charm his way out of anything. Mia sat on a stool behind the counter, hands folded over Kev's locket inside its evidence bag. Fear and adrenaline made her hyper-alert. Every hiss of the compressor felt like static in her bones. Todd kept a steady hand on the register as officers photographed the pump receipts, lining them like evidence on clean paper. Ramirez scrolled through the codes Mia had collected, her brow darkening with each match to the depot manifests Mia had sent. "They're routing crates through the bays as returns," Ramirez explained quietly to Mia and Todd, once the initial chaos settled. "Creating phantom returns, so inventory looks correct while goods are diverted. Then those crates get picked up or consolidated off the record." She tapped a receipt. "This code matches a pickup at Bay 4 on the 15th. Hector's name is on several of these manifests through a shell subcontractor." One officer edged toward the white van, prying a rear door open while another read serial numbers on a clipboard. The foreman's casualness vanished as techs found falsified paperwork and a ledger listing bay numbers, dates, and shorthand initials. Ramirez's phone lit up. A colleague had executed a raid on the storage yard tied to the subcontractor and found several sealed crates that had guaranteed been properly logged by the main supplier. The yard was a few miles downriver, a squat place of corrugated steel and stacked pallets, smelling of diesel and old rain. Forensic techs in gloves cut seals and lifted tarps. Inside the nearest crate were boxes of electronics, jewelry packed in unlabeled bags, and a dented plastic bin at the bottom. Personal items, a child's handmade bracelet, a faded photo, a small watch with a family inscription. Ramirez held them up like proof the ledger had been true. "These aren't just stolen items," she said. "They're pieces of people's lives." Mia watched, heart hollering in her throat. She remembered Kev's face when he decomplained about odd nights and extra cash paid under the table. She remembered the way he'd stayed late, fingers tracing code on the terminal, muttering about scripts he was trying to run. When they searched Kev's last apartment, they found a tangle of notes and a half-broken phone. Forensics recovered a deleted voice memo. Kev reading aloud a sequence of letters and numbers. Then a breathy whisper, "If anything happens to me, print it when you see the reboot." The audio clipped and ended. Ramirez's jaw tightened. He made the printout a failsafe, she said. If he was silenced, the system would still force these codes into the open whenever the network initialized. There was a slow, private grief in Mia then. Rage folded into admiration. Kev had tried to make the truth mechanical, immutable. If death fell between his plan and its completion, the receipts were his continuing voice. Back at the station, officers tracked phone records and payments. The chain ran longer than they'd hoped. Drivers coerced into accepting runs for cash. Foremen turning a blind eye. Fences paying to redistribute goods. Some of the drivers were scared into complicity. One young temp wept as she confessed how Hector's men had threatened to burn her apartment if she ratted them out. Ramirez took notes, balancing legal harshness with the messy realities of survival. Hector Salas himself was harder to pin down. He tried first to charm, then to nitpick paperwork. Ramirez pressed on receipts, ledger cross-references, GPS pings, and bank transfers disguised as logistics adjustments. She laid bricks of evidence until the man's defenses crumbled. With warrants and the physical cash, prosecutors had enough to arrest 2 coordinators and several fence operatives. Some participants accepted plea deals, citing coercion. Others faced stiffer charges. The headlines called it a smuggling ring that used convenience stores and pump networks as a thin, plausible cover. Todd let out a breath he had realized he'd have been holding when officers carted the last of the crates away. The station would get its reputation back. Maybe. Mia stood on the lot and watched the taillights disappear, Kev's locket heavy against her palm. "Did we do the right thing?" she asked. More to the empty air than to anyone. Ramirez's answer was practical. "You did what you could with what you had. Receipts gave us a timeline and points to search. Paper rarely lies in a case like this." For weeks, the pump prints were quiet, the thermal strips delivering only totals and taxes. Mia went back to coding and keeping the till neat. Todd bled through invoices, making sure nothing else had been tampered with. The city's morning paper ran a strip to their story, and curious customers drifted in and out, leaving with conspiratorial glances, others with relief. One night, months later, Mia stood alone by Pump 2, as the last of the late trucks rumbled away. The pump printed as usual. She tore off the receipt, thumbed the curled edge, and paused. On the underside, a faint extra line had appeared, not part of any macro they'd found before. All made characters, almost like someone had written with a pen. "KM, thanks." She turned the slip over again as if it might change. Kev's initials, unmistakable to anyone who had known him, gleamed in the press of the thermal ink. Mia slid the paper into her pocket and walked inside, feeling a chill that wasn't entirely sadness. Whether the machine had completed Kev's plan or something unexplainable had nudged it, one thing was clear. The ledger's paper trail had been a voice after all. And the station had become a place where the dead, small, stubborn truths refused to be buried. Todd flicked off the pumps for the night and locked the office door. For the first time in a long while, he felt the station was secure. Yet as he stepped out into the cool air, he couldn't stop glancing at the pump, where thermal slips curled like small flags. Technology had given Kev a way to speak, and paper had kept his promise. That promise, Todd realized, didn't tea always end neatly? It left a whisper in the dark that some stories never truly close,